Hello guys, this is Marco, the retro guy, and today I'm going to discuss with you ideas and an actual method that I have to record floppy disks so that you can use with your Apple II, Apple IIe and such. I have to be honest, growing up, I never had a lot of contact with Apples, Apple machines, I mean. Mostly I used MSX machines back in Brazil, where I am from, and PCs, but also Macintosh when they become available with a more affordable price. But rarely I used Apple II, for example, and equivalents. So I don't have a lot of experience with Apple II machines, but I still like them a lot. They do remind me of, a very nice time in my life. I learned BASIC in an Apple II computer, so they do bring me back to some very good times. Well, the thing is, I bought maybe a year ago or something like that, a Macintosh LC 475 with an Apple II card inside, like an LC Apple II card. Was very fortunate to find a good machine, which is that LC 475 with a working Apple II card, and not only that, but also with the floppy drive and the Y cable. So I haven't been using that so much because of what I mentioned. Don't have a lot of experience with Apple IIs, and never really found a lot of interest in using that. And some days ago, I started to, doing a little research and starting to use that a little bit more, because it's very interesting, it's very retro, and I love working with floppy disks, for example, especially the 5.1/4 ones. So it's really interesting, and it has been interesting because of the difficulty that I found to record those floppy disks. So if I want, for example, to run a game in that card, it's not that straightforward, because you have to port or transfer that game file into your Apple II formatted partition, if you have one, or to floppy disks. So it is a lot of work, I have to say, but quite interesting nevertheless. So the idea behind this video is to show how I am doing this, because I didn't find a lot of information around, and I suffered a lot really to come up with something that actually worked without a lot of hustle. So I found, for example, in the internet, methods that relied on using, for example, serial transfer, and I didn't even try that. It didn't seem right. It looked very complicated. You have to have the right cables to go in, and I haven't even saw anyone doing that with an actual Apple II card. I mean the Macintosh Apple II card, only with real Apple II machines, which is not my case. So I didn't even attempt that. Luckily, I found several different videos and some posts on some blog posts going through different methods, and by going through different methods, I eventually came up with something that worked. So it is working fine. I can easily transfer and record floppy disks, and I wanted to share with you guys how to do it, basically, or how I do it. Not saying this is the best method, but at least it seems to work just fine. So I'm going to show you here. I'm going to start basically change to my computer screen now, where I'm going to show you where to download those Apple II games. It's very easy. Just go to Google and look for it. You're going to find at least 10 different websites where you can go and download. So I'm going to attempt this one here now, and we're going to test it with Ghostbusters. It's just like a game that I used to play a lot in the MSX, so I am at least familiarized with this particular one. So let's try that and see how that goes. I'm going to show you a step-by-step into how to make this work, okay? The method that I'm going to be showing probably should work with real Apple IIs as well, as long as you have 3.5 floppy drive on it. So I'm going to use a 3.5 floppy drive here to do the transfer bit, which means you have to have one, otherwise it won't work. In the case of the Macintosh Apple II card, luckily the Apple II card recognizes the Macintosh floppy drive, the native Macintosh floppy drive, which means you gain like instantly 3.5 floppy drive when running the card, right? And on top of that, I have a dedicated 5.25 floppy drive that is only for the Apple II part. So I'm going to show you that in a moment. Okay, so I'm going to switch now to record my monitor screen here so that we can download, record that to a pen drive. Then I'm going to show you the whole process step by step. Okay, so here we are. This is the website. As you can see, it reads wronggames.net. This is only one of the several different existing ones where you can go to basically download Apple II games and applications and such. So Ghostbusters is right here. So I'm going to click on it. Then I'm going to click on Save Game. And it should start downloading. As you can see, there's a lot of ads here. So there you go. It has downloaded it. I'm going to open it up. As you can see here. So this is basically the game, and it is in a DSK format. So this is a Pro DOS disk image, which means you're not going to be able to open it up on your Macintosh natively. If you try to mount it using disk copy, for example, it won't work. I tried that. I didn't know Pro DOS. I didn't know how it worked. So that's one of the things that I spent a lot of time getting it to work. So what you need to do is this. Get a pen drive, like, a regular pen drive. Doesn't matter which one you're going to get. So I have a very simple one here. And just stick that to your machine. In my case, it's a PC, right? So I'm going to basically copy this image into my pen drive. So it should be there, I think. So let's see. As you can see, I have already here like some other disk images that I was basically recording before. So I have Load Runner, Karateka, Arkanoid, Apple logo, and some others like Oregon Trail. All of those worked. The only one that I couldn't get it to work was Shoplifter. For some reason it didn't work. I don't know if it is maybe not compatible with Pro DOS, or maybe the image is screwed up. I have no idea. And the other one that I couldn't get it to work, it's not here in this list, is Prince of Persia. That didn't work as well. At least the booting disk didn't boot at all. So it might be again like a defective image or something like this. The others work just fine. So I haven't tested Ghostbusters yet. So we're going to do this together. Okay, so it's in my pen drive now. I'm going to basically remove this and bring to another computer. So the next step is you need to have a computer that has a 3.5 floppy drive. I don't have one here. So this is a more modern computer. So I have to go to an older computer that has one. I haven't tested it with USB floppy drives. Not sure whether or not this will work with USB floppy drives. So I can't really say, right? I'm actually going to use a PC that has a built-in 3.5 floppy drive. And for that matter, it works just fine. So stick with me. I'm going to now move to the other computer. I'm going to bring the pen drive, the thumb drive into the other computer. We're going to use it and I'm going to show you how. So this is the computer I'm going to be using for this. This is an old Gateway Pentium 3 computer. As you can see, it has a floppy just there, right? And it supports USB as well, which is very convenient as well, right? So that's basically the computer. Let me turn the monitor on and let me see if I can put this somewhere stable so we can actually see this going. Perfect. Okay, so so that's Windows 98 that I'm using here. You don't have to use such an old version of Windows to actually get this to work, but it has to be Windows because the software you're going to be using for this is only available on Windows up to Windows, I think it works up to Windows 10 if I'm not mistaken. So it doesn't have to be Windows 98 or 95 or even XP, because it could be Windows 7, for example, it should work just fine, right? So if you are a guy that is into retro computers, for sure you have something flying around that should have a floppy drive that you can use that is running the right version of Windows. So for this, what we're going to do here is we're going to use a program that is called CiderPress. So you have to download this program. It is freeware. Just look it up on Google. CiderPress Pro DOS. Look for that. You're going to find the website where you can download the installation archives for this to your machine. It's very straightforward. Should work out of the box. So I'm going to now put the thumb drive here in this Windows desktop. Let's wait for it to be recognized and show up. Okay, should be okay. I think it's going to open the window as soon as it comes online. Wait for it. Well, maybe not, but it should be here. Yeah, it's here. Removable disk G, that's my thumb drive. So what I'm going to do now is this. Using CiderPress, I'm going to create a new disk image, right? So you have to click on the create new disk image here. So let me see if I can get this a little bit closer so you guys have a better understanding of what I'm trying to do here. Yeah, I think that's a little bit better, right? Maybe, yeah, that's it. So you're going to select this option here, right? So create disk image, and we are going to create a new Pro DOS image, and it has to be 800 kilobytes. So avoid choosing any other size for this particular one. We are going to dump this image later on to the floppy disk. Okay, so let's create a new one. So name it whatever it is that you want. So I'm going to name it Games 2, for example. It's better if I actually spell it correctly. Games 2, and okay. And where I'm going to save it on my desktop, so Games 2 here, and save it. Right, so this is my brand new image. It's blank, there is nothing inside. So what we're going to do now is we're going to add those DSK images that we downloaded from that website previously. So click on this icon here, which is Add Files, and look it up under your thumb drive, right? So as you can see, all my DSKs are here. So we are looking for the Ghostbusters. So accept, and it's now inside of my newly built image, Pro DOS image. So what is the next step? We are now going to write this image to a floppy disk, right? So as you can see, this is a high density floppy disk, regular floppy disk, 3.5 floppy disk that you can find around anywhere. So I'm going to put that in the drive here. And I'm going to now select this option, which is volume copier, right? So click on that. It should understand that I have a floppy disk in my floppy drive. Even if it is not formatted, it doesn't matter, because you are going to write an image to that floppy, so it doesn't really matter what's inside. Well, it shouldn't matter. In my case here, sometimes it takes a while for the floppy to actually get recognized. I think maybe it's because of the computer, I don't know. Probably that shouldn't be the case every time, right? So I have done this in the past, and it didn't take that long every time. Sometimes yes, sometimes it was fairly fast. So as you can see, it lists all the drives that I have. I have here my floppy disk 0. This is the 3.5 floppy drive that I have. And I'm going to uncheck this option here that says open as read only. After all, we are going to write into that floppy. So you have to uncheck this option, which is checked by default. Click OK. So it's now going to load that disk image, right? That's the disk image that I created before. For some reason, it doesn't record that name that I gave, which was games 2, showing as new disk 2. Doesn't really matter. And select that, make sure you click on it so it's blue, and then you're going to look for this option here, load from file, right? So we're going to click on that, and then you're going to select that disk image that you created before. In my case here is this games 2 here, right? So select that and click on open. It is going to tell you that it is going to overwrite whatever is on the floppy drive, on the floppy disk, and that the size is not really matching. So the floppy drive, the floppy disk has a size of basically much larger size than the image file they're going to write to it, and it's basically saying it's going to waste the excess amount of the excessive size that is going to be left over. So don't really care about that. Say that you are okay. So it's going to write that image to the disk. So meanwhile, I'm going to power up my Mac here. So by the time this floppy is over with the writing, the Mac should be ready to go as well, hopefully. So let's wait a little bit. I'm going to be around here. I'm not going to cut this, or maybe I should, I don't know. So yeah, let me cut this and come back when this is over, okay? Okay, so it's nearly over and it's done. So finish here. We can basically shut down this PC now. And what you are left with is now this floppy drive, this floppy disk here is now a ProDOS 800K copy of that image that you created before, right? So what we are going to do next is now go to the Mac that has the Apple II card, which in my case is a Color Classic. So yeah, I think that might be good enough. So that's my Color Classic, and as you can see here, I have the actual Apple II 5.25 floppy drive, and the objective now is going to be to record that game into that floppy, right? So let's put this here. Because I have already the Apple II card installed in this Mac, it should be able to recognize ProDOS systems, right? So it recognizes the floppy here, as you can see, games 2, right, is showing here. If you open it up, you're going to see that it has only that DSK image. There is nothing else here, and there is nothing really you can do with that in the Mac. So what we're going to do now is, you see that I have two volumes here, ProDOS 1 and ProDOS 2. Those are disk partitions, each one having 32 megs of size, which is the maximum size of a ProDOS partition that you can have. So ProDOS 2 here has a lot of utilities that I use, for example, copying disks and generating floppies and things like that. The one that I use here that I really like is called Disk Maker 8. So if you are going to be doing something similar, right, I suggest you guys use this one, Disk Maker 8. It's really intuitive and easy to use. So double click on it. When you double click on a ProDOS file, it automatically opens up Apple II. The Apple II card basically is initiated, and you are now boot into the Apple II machine inside of the Mac. So it's booting up, as you can see, and this is the utility. So let me see if I can get this a little bit. So it's very intuitive to use this. Basically, you have to select the disk that you're going to be reading from. So in our case, it's going to be that ProDOS floppy that I added. So I'm going to click on disks here, It's going to read all the disks in the system that are Pro-DOS disks, and it finds the Games 2 there. So it's the second one here, right? Games 2, not sure if you guys can read it, so I'm going to put this a little bit closer. So hopefully you guys can read what I'm doing here, right? So I'm going to now click on open, and inside of it I find that ghostbusters.tsk. It's there. So what is the next step? I'm going to now open my 5¼ floppy disk box here, and I'm going to use one that I can spare here. So the one, the Prince of Persia, that didn't work as expected, so I'm going to be using that one. So I'm going to now place this into the drive here. So let me just put the camera a little bit further away so you guys can actually see that, right? So putting the floppy into the Apple II drive here, and now I'm going to say open the image, the DSK image, right? I want to use this Ghostbuster one, and then it's going to try to find a floppy disk in the drive, and it found one, right? So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to say make disk. So that's the third option there, the one that I selected here, make disk. Not sure if you guys can read that, but trust me, that's what it reads. And then hit enter. So it's already writing Ghostbuster into the floppy. You can see that the floppy LED here is basically lighting up. So it's copying from this floppy here onto the 5¼ So this is the method. As you can see, it is very easy to do. Well, I have to say the complicated part here is to actually install these applications into that disk partition in the Mac. It requires you to use the emulator in your PC and things like that. So I'm not going to go through that right now, right? So, but anyways, this method here for recording floppies, it works really well. And as I said, if you do have a 3.5 floppy drive in your Apple II, in your real Apple II machine, this method should work just fine as well. So it is an easy way for you to gather, your game collection out of the internet using DSK formatted images and dump them into actual floppy disks and create your collection from it. So let's wait for this to finish. It should take another 10-15 seconds, and once it's done, it is going to tell me that the recording was successful and whether or not I want to boot from the newly created floppy disk that is in here. So let's wait for this to finish. I'm going to say that I want to boot from it, and we're going to see whether or not this worked. As I said, many games that I tried worked just fine, but some didn't. Some gave me errors when I tried to boot. Some didn't even boot at all. So not sure whether or not Ghostbusters will be working. So hopefully it will. So let's just wait for it to finish and you're going to see. Right, so maybe 5 seconds more. Meanwhile, let me just shut down my PC here. There's no need for it to be running, and it's kind of noisy as well. So let's shut it down. Almost done. Yeah, I said 5 seconds. I think I was being way too optimistic. Yeah, that's much better in terms of the noise level as well. Okay, almost done, and there you go. So it's asking me now whether or not I want to boot from the newly created floppy, and I'm going to say yes. And the moment of truth. Let's see whether or not this worked. So it's trying to boot from the floppy, and there you go. It's working just fine. Right, so still loading the game from the floppy here. And there you have it. One thing that I couldn't find yet is how to lower the volume. It doesn't work like the Mac volume knobs here, doesn't really do anything. and it's so loud. Yeah, it doesn't do anything. So that's it, guys. As you can see, like it works for most of the, you know, the files, and it's really fun, you know, to have this. So I'm for sure going to be using a lot more of this environment now that I have the floppies with the games that I love, and I even going to, you know, like do a little more research on the Apple II and what can be done with that, and so that I can dive deeper into it. After all, this is a historical machine and it deserves all the attention and the kudos and everything else. That's what I wanted to show you today. Hopefully you guys enjoyed it, and hopefully it's going to be useful for some of you. Unfortunately, as I said, I couldn't find any step-by-step tutorial out there, and hopefully this is going to help a lot of you guys. Later on, I'm going to show you how to use the emulator like ShipShiver and others to basically create those partitions in your Mac. In my case, I'm using a Mac, of course, so that you can transfer, for example, those utilities like disk copy and things like that onto that partition, and then you can basically deal with that, right? So by the way, an easy way for you to do that is basically do the same thing that I did here. You can just download the utilities straight on the internet and record them in a ProDOS formatted floppy, and it should be okay, I think, for you to just drag and drop those to the partition. I haven't tried that way, but I'm just assuming that it should work just fine. Not entirely sure, but it should, right? The way that I did was a little bit more complicated, by using the emulator and then generating an image, and so that's basically the way I choose to do it, and it works just fine as well. But that's for another video. Thank you guys, see you next time.